Hey, welcome to Taylor's Trick Taking Table. I'm Trick, more specifically, Trick of the Rails. Today we're playing Hisashi Hayashi's Trick Taking, but also, since it's 2-lie, Stock Manipulation and Train game. So, I don't know if you can hear it in my voice. I'm not just Trick, I'm also sick. But I'm not sick of the rails, because even though board games kind of, they love to have a bunch of different forms of transportation, you know, sailing in the Mediterranean, or driving, or cameling, all the way to submarine and dirigible, or if you're small enough, maybe carrier pigeon. But no other form has been represented as much as trains. There's even a genre called XX18 or something. It's games where the year ends in 18 and tons of trains about it. But the hook to Trick of the Rails is players are playing trick taking with stocks in train companies. So you might be playing to the trick and earning stock in that company, or you might be playing to the trick and adding to the railway of that company. Really interesting concept. Let's go to the table and I'll show you how to play. The deck in Trick of the Rails has a lot on it, but for the most part, what you pay attention to is the rank and the suit in the center here, and also the color. So there's 5 suits numbered 1 through 10. Here we have Trick of the Rails set up for 3 players, kind of a lot here, so I had to zoom out. But the general setup is each player at 3 gets 15 cards, and the rest of the cards are just dealt out to the side here. These are going to be the 5 different railway companies that are going to grow their train railway system out. And then over here is what's known as the trick lane. And the trick lane at 3 players has a specific setup, and it's on the side of the box here, which is really helpful and nice. But so what it means is the first trick we're going to be playing for this card, the second for this, the third for this, and then all the way down to the end here. So the 15 tricks are going to kind of follow this pattern. So the first trick is fighting over this gray card up here. And as you can see here, there's a bunch of different types of cards, a lot of symbols, but the general premise of the game is you'll either be playing for adding railway, making a certain company's railway longer, or playing for stock, which is this stamp symbol that's also on all of the cards up at the top right there. So high level, there's 2 types of tricks. There's getting more stock for all the players, or adding to the railway of some of the companies. So the first trick is about stock. Let's just say Kiki over on the broom here is the lead player. So in Trick of the Rails, it's a must-follow game. So Kiki wanted to lead this one yellow. The future bike over here has to play yellow if they have one. Maybe they really want to win it, so they play a 10 of yellow, and then the bus will just follow suit and play their 8 of yellow. The winner of the trick is the person who played the highest of the lead suit. So if you're off suit and you played, a 10 in green, there's no trumping and it's not highest number, so the future bike here would still lose. But since they were in suit and played a 10, they won this first trick. This first trick was all about this gray stock, so whoever wins it gets a gray stock. And then the people who didn't win it will actually flip a card and they'll take stock in the company of the cards they played. So Kiki over here will get 1 stock in yellow. The bus will also get 1 stock in yellow. They'll just put that in front of themselves. But then this card right here doesn't become stock for the future bike. It actually will show up later in the game. Why that is because grabbing the gray here, as you can see, it has a symbol up at the top left, and it says the card you used is either discarded or it's added to get as stock later in the game. If there's any of these plus symbols, you would remove the plus symbol and you'd put the card you just played as available stock for the next round. And that's possibly a little complicated. Don't worry about it now, we'll get to it later. But what it means is the bike actually won a gray stock. After the first trick, the bike has a gray stock and then the other 2 players have yellow stock. Then the bike would lead to the next trick. And what they're playing over now isn't stock, because as you can see, or possibly not see, as you can see up at the top right here, this isn't the stock symbol, this is the railway symbol. The second trick is fighting over this railway. So maybe the bike really wants it, and they play the 10 green, and everyone just follows suit. And so what this means is, the winner of a rail trick will take this card of the rails, and they get to place it on either side of these train companies that are being built here. And so now's a good time to cover what this middle part of the trains mean. So as you can see, there's different numbers, like maybe 30, or over here, every train station starts with 10, sometimes 20, and the cards themselves have values on them as well, like 40 or 10. At the end of the game, depending on which train is going to be at the start of a certain railway's station, that is going to count a certain number of cards and total up all these values to find out how much the stock of that company is worth. That might sound a little bit confusing, but it'll make more sense once we jump to the end score. But for now, the bike here is just going to add this to blue. Then these cards, since they're in a railway trick and not a stock trick, they don't come to players' hands or in front of them as stock. They actually get added to their respective train stations. Starting with the winner, who was the bike, they'll add to either side of the train, and then it's just going to go around in a circle. So the bus might add it over here, and then Kiki might add it there. And as you can see here, kind of running out of a little bit of room. Since the bike won that trick, they'll lead to the next trick, which is now for a red stock. And as you can see up here, it's either stock or that railway type that we've covered all the way to here. So I'm going to move some things around and fast forward to this trick to explain what that means. Now we're playing for the first train card. So Kiki won the last trick, which was the green stock. So maybe they lead to the trick with red, and the speed bike plays their red, and bus is out of red, so they can play whatever they want. Maybe they notice they have a lot of yellow and they want to add to the yellow railway, because this is, as you can see up here, a railway trick, not a stock trick, even though this is all different. So Kiki won because they played the highest of the lead suit, and so they'll take this card and they get to add it to the end of any of these stations. And what this does is it kind of caps out the station in terms of the cards that can be counted towards its value. So up here's the number of cards, 3, that could totally be counted for its value. What that means is if Kiki were to place this on white here, only 3 of the cards, even though there's 5 here, would count toward the stock value of that rail company. So say she did put it there, and what the 3 cards mean is you can look at 3 cards to try to get the most value for the train. So in this case, the 20, 20, and then one of the 10s is the strongest you could build for that company. So that's 50, but then you'd have to minus 40. So this company right now is only worth 10 stock value or money or stock worth. I'm not sure. It's just worth 10. But if Kiki were to place it here, as you can see, the 40, 10, and 20 is the most valued. So this would actually be 60, 70, minus 40. So this would be $30 worth if it was placed on the green. After that happens, then Kiki would place their rail on either side of the red, and then the bike, then the bus would place on the yellow. So similar things, the train stuff still happens, but this gets placed before. So as you can see up here, there are enough train stations for each of the 5 stations. And all they are is, starting with 3 cards and 40, they just increase in value. So the next one is 4 cards and 50, all the way up to this one where it's 6 cards and 70, or this one is all of the cards. That's what the infinity, that's what the infinity means, and then 80. It's kind of comical how much space I'm running out of, but so I moved that so I can add the 2 railways there. But as you can see up here, the rest of the trick we've kind of covered before. So that's just a yellow stock, then you're placing the 4. This over here, so these are the cards that were used to win the first 3 stock rounds, and they are now just treated as stock. So this 10 yellow and that yellow reserve up there, those are effectively the same in the trick lane. So whoever wins would take that as stock and discard their own card. And so players would just play out the rest and they'd have enough stock. All the rails would be laid out, and I'll show you what that looks like now by jumping to the end. So here's kind of how it will look like at the end. I think the railways will be a little longer. I was just a little short on space there. But so everyone will have 8 stocks. The railways will all be out with their trains. And so you'll calculate the stock value of every station. So like we did before, this is 3 cards, and the best 3 are these first 3. So that's 70 minus 40. So green is going to be 30 points for every green stock. And they give you a sheet to write this in, I think. I kind of just write over it. But so on the sheet, you have all the 5 different train stations, and then I just write the value over here, and then the investors up here. So you got bus, bike, and broom. And so then for gray, and all the way up through yellow, I'll just recalculate these. We could do gray right now, but it's all of the cards and then minus 80. So this is actually 40, 50, 60, 70, minus 80, so those are worth minus 10 each. The values aren't 100% here. So here we have all the values. They're not 100% realistic because not all of the railways got added. But as you can see here, you kind of have an evaluation, and then you would look and see how many cards of each type this certain card player owns. So maybe bus over here has 2 gray. You'd go to the gray. You'd see that the grays are all worth negative 10. So bus would get minus 20 in that field. They have 3 yellow, so 120, and you just add them all up, and then you see whoever has the most total of all the 8 stocks, and whoever has the most wins. So that is Trick of the Rails, and it's fun. You know, it's a game where there's a lot to it, and I think you got to play it a few times just to really get a sense of what's going on. Definitely after the first one. The first one you kind of have to learn the flow of the game and what all the symbols mean. I remember teaching it. I got a kind of a whiff of like teaching Race for the Galaxy a little bit. It's nowhere near as obtuse or off-putting, but there's a lot of symbols, and they do all make sense once you know them. But kind of getting new players into the flow, there's a lot of moving parts, and I think it's a little dense at the start. But once you're into it, I think there's a good game here. I love how they have the setup instructions, and for each player count, the trick lane on the side of the box. Super helpful. And that trick lane itself is really important to kind of understand what you're trying to do in this game and the flow of the game. I do love how it goes from stock to rail to stock to rail. I love bouncing back and forth in the game and having still that steady through line of following suit. It's kind of fun to feel like you're playing 2 halves of a trick taker and changing that mindset, but still using the same cards. It does multi-use cards really well in this game to, you know, either use it for train or for stock. And if you really kind of plan in this game and have kind of a little bit of an idea of where you're going, you can know which cards are going to be rails for you that you want, kind of, unless you get spilled out through the trick taking, but which ones are going to be stock as well. I haven't covered any before, but this is actually a one-hand trick taker. You don't see it too often. I think because generally trick takers try to have multiple hands because, as you know, trick taking, sometimes you can just get a bad hand, some tough deals. But this one kind of skirts that and is just that one hand. And it's interesting. I think it adds 2 things I really like. One thing I don't quite like, because you could feel like you got a bad hand. I do think in this game you can finagle any bad hand to still win. I mean, everyone's always getting 8 stock. It's not like a bad hand will lose you the amount of stock. But the 2 things I do like is the game is super short. A one-hand game, it can be a little bit more lucky, I think. And I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of saying, like, shorter games have an allowance to be worse, because I don't think that's good. But the idea that one hand could just be bad for you, but you could just, you know, start again in the next game if you really like the game, it's a little freeing. But also kind of builds the tension, you know? You never are like, oh, I can try to win the game in the next hand. It's just, you see your hand and it doesn't change. So there's kind of a nice finality to it. I'd say this game is more strategic, maybe than the average trick taker. You have to definitely plan that one hand out. You have to know that you might not win a lot. And often the games end with the last, like, 5 tricks or so, where it's the same person winning every trick. So when the game kind of, pardon the pun, gets on rails a little bit at the end there, you do have to make sure you had a plan at the start and then are trying to see that plan through. I know, you know, if you're trying to evaluate the hand is somewhat hard in this game, but if you have high numbers, you're going to be controlling a lot. So maybe you do try to keep yourself flexible. But if you have low numbers and a lot of one station or company, then those might be a lot of your stock, you know, because you're usually, if you're losing, going to be getting the stock of what you play. So I think it's kind of a mindset game where if you understand the rhythm and the flow of the game and how it bounces from stock to rail and kind of the no trumping and kind of a lot of the time someone will just kind of run the game for a while, usually like 4 or 5 tricks in a row, but how you can coast off that and sometimes line up, you know, your stocks with someone else and take advantage of that. There's things and cool maneuvers that you can do in this game that are tough to see on the outside. But like every hand of the game, it kind of just ends with someone winning the last at least 4 tricks. In every game of this, every player had control at a certain time. And it's a lot about when do you want control. Do you want control when the first railways are going out, so you can always put the weakest, you know, the 3 and the 4 train cards on the ones you don't care about? Or do you care more about the stock rounds? I think that when do you lead decision is probably the crux and probably the more interesting part of the game, because I think usually you'll lose it, or unless it's at the end where usually you'll just keep it for a while, and maybe the end is when you did care about winning. At the end there's an interesting kind of finality to how it works out. And at the start what's really funny, especially with the stock cards, is that most people are in suit. So if the leader plays like yellow and everyone falls it's yellow. But the stock for sale is like, red or green. It's a cool way to differentiate players at the start, but then keep two kind of aligned. I'm talking a lot about a 3-player game, because I think the 3-player with the reserves is probably the best way to play it. But it's interesting at 3 because there's cool tension of, oftentimes after the first few tricks, some players are really aligned. So they have similar goals. And there's one player who maybe was winning a lot of the tricks, and they've diversified themselves. So they've had control, but at the cost of being different than a majority of the players at the table. So I love the push and pull of how it makes everyone kind of go for different stocks at the very start and seed the deck in interesting ways from the first trick. I've talked before about how if a game has 2 mechanisms, like trick taking is something else, maybe balancing the 2 leads to a better game. And this one was interesting is coming from the point of view of trick taking. It's a little lighter. I said before, it's a little on rails. And if you wanted more of a trick taking game out of this, I think all the stuff with stock markets, trains, and kind of that whole system is a little overbearing. So I don't know if as a trick taking game, this shines too much. I think it is genuinely more of a stock trading or train kind of game, which isn't a bad thing. I don't mind when trick taking is used to kind of facilitate some of the play, but it does, I think, if you're a pure trick taker, I don't think this is the game for you. So that is Trick of the Rails, and I like it. I think if you don't like stock or trains, I don't think there's much for you here. Possibly the trick taking is lighter, a little bit more procedural. Definitely strategic, and the game itself is quick, 15 to 20 minutes probably, and it's on Board Game Arena if you want to try it for free. So give it a shot if you think the stock trading train stuff sounds interesting to you. But yeah, thanks so much for watching.